If anyone has the power to make you angry, then you've already handed them control over your life. And once you truly understand that, you'll stop searching for peace in other people's behavior and start building a fortress no one can take from you. You don't need the world to become kinder. You need to stop letting it rule you. Maybe you think your problem is the stress at work, not your partner's attitude. That coworker who always pushes your buttons, traffic, disrespect, the constant stream of bad news. But it isn't. None of those things has the power you believe they do. What truly determines how your day ends is the meaning you assign to each of them. That's the mistake almost everyone makes. They think they're reacting to reality. In truth, they're reacting to the story they create about reality. And until you recognize that difference, you'll keep living like an emotional puppet. Over the next few minutes, you'll discover 10 simple principles that have helped millions of people, from the ancient Stoics to leaders, soldiers, and ordinary men and women, regain mastery over themselves, even in the middle of chaos. These aren't complicated theories. They're shifts in perspective. And when your perspective changes, your identity changes with it. But there's something even more important. There's a habit so common that most people never even notice it. A habit that feels completely normal, yet quietly drains your energy every single day. In a few minutes, you'll see exactly what it is. And when you do, you'll probably realize you've been feeding it for years. It's one of the greatest thieves of inner peace you'll ever encounter. Because the problem never begins with an argument, It starts much earlier. It starts the moment you unknowingly decide that other people have permission to determine how you'll feel. Think about it. Someone makes a comment. Your body tenses. Your breathing changes. Your mind immediately starts building its case. You replay the conversation over and over. You imagine what you should have said. You invent arguments that haven't even happened yet. Meanwhile, the other person has probably already moved on with their day. You're the one still carrying the weight. That means the argument ended out there, but it's still happening inside you. And that's where one of the most uncomfortable truths about personal growth reveals itself. Most people don't lose their peace because of what happens. They lose it because of what they keep repeating in their own minds. It's not a lack of self-control. It's an internal pattern that's been reinforced for years. Every time you reacted impulsively, every time you felt the need to have the last word, every time you tried to prove you were right, you strengthened an automatic program, a program that reacts before it thinks, judges before it understands, attacks before it observes. And the more often that pattern repeats, the more natural it feels, until one day you say, "This is just who I am." But it isn't, it's a habit. And every habit can be replaced. The Stoics understood this more than 2,000 years ago. They didn't try to control the weather. They didn't try to control other people. They didn't expect the world to be fair. They trained something far more powerful. Their ability to choose who they would be, no matter what happened around them. Because they understood an idea that's still revolutionary today. True freedom isn't about controlling what happens. It's about refusing to let what happens control who you become. Maybe someone just came to mind. That one person who can irritate you with a single sentence. The one who always seems to know exactly which button to push. And maybe you're thinking, it's impossible to stay calm around someone like that. But there's a trap hidden inside that belief. Because as long as you think that person has to change before you can find peace, you'll never find peace. You've placed your well-being in the hands of someone who probably doesn't even know they're holding it. It's like handing the keys to your house to a stranger, then acting surprised when they walk in without knocking. That's exactly what happens every time you let someone's opinion criticism or provocation decide the state of your mind. You've given them access to your most valuable assets. Your stability, your attention, your energy, your inner wealth. And the more of that energy you scatter across difficult people, old conflicts, and lingering resentment, the less you have left to build the life you actually want. That's why this video isn't about learning how to tolerate difficult people. That wouldn't be enough. It's about something much deeper. It's about reclaiming authority over your inner world. Because the day no one can purchase your peace with a provocation is the day you stop reacting like a victim of circumstances and start acting like the architect of your character. But before that can happen, you first have to discover who's really been pulling the strings all this time. And the answer is probably not what you expect. There is one skill the Stoics practiced every single day, yet almost no one trains it anymore. It didn't require money. It didn't depend on luck. Or a special personality. But it allowed them to remain calm while everyone else completely lost control. In a few minutes you'll discover what that skill was. But first you need to understand why you keep reacting, even after promising yourself that this time would be different. Because this is where the real enemy reveals itself. And it isn't the person who disagrees with you. It isn't your boss. It isn't your family. It isn't society. It's a silent mechanism operating beneath your awareness. A mechanism so fast that it acts before you even have time to think. Watch what happens. Someone criticizes you. In less than a second, an emotion appears. Then comes a thought. Then a reaction. And finally, the consequence. It all happens so quickly that it feels inevitable. So you tell yourself, I couldn't help it. But that's not entirely true. What you couldn't stop was a program that's been running for years. Imagine a computer. When you press a key, it doesn't decide what to do in that moment. It simply runs the software that's already installed. Most people live exactly like that. Every provocation presses a button, and the mind runs the same script it's always run. Defend yourself. Justify yourself. Attack. Hold on to resentment. Seek approval. Prove you're right. It's automatic. And because it's automatic, you almost never question it. That's the danger. The strongest chains are the ones you can't see. Here's the first great lesson. You don't react to events, you react to the meaning you assign to them. Two people receive the exact same comment. One smiles. The other lies awake, thinking about it all night. What changed? Not the comment. The interpretation. That should leave you with an uncomfortable question. If two people can experience completely different emotional realities after the exact same event, was the problem really the event, or was it their perception? The Stoics repeated an idea that was remarkably simple. We are disturbed not by things themselves, but by the judgments we make about them. And even after more than 2,000 years, that insight still describes the human mind with astonishing accuracy. Because your automatic judgment arrives before reason has a chance to speak. You see someone with a serious expression. You assume they're upset with you. You receive a short text. You assume something is wrong. Someone doesn't reply. You assume rejection. Your mind hates uncertainty. It would rather invent a story than accept that it doesn't know. That's one of its strongest biases. And the less aware you are of it, the more it controls your life. Then another silent enemy enters the picture. Expectations. You expect everyone to be fair. You expect recognition. You expect gratitude. You expect courtesy. You expect understanding. And every hidden expectation is a contract the other person never agreed to sign. When they fail to meet it, frustration takes over. But reality never promised to behave the way you expected. Reality simply unfolds. Suffering begins the moment you demand that it unfold differently. That doesn't mean giving up. It means seeing clearly, because you can only respond effectively to reality once you're willing to see it as it is, not as you wish it were. There's another pattern that quietly consumes an enormous amount of energy. The need to be right. It looks like a virtue. But more often than not, it's a prison. Think about it. How many arguments have you entered because you genuinely wanted to understand someone? Very few. Most began because you wanted to win. And winning an argument can cost you something far more valuable. Your peace. The ego is a terrible negotiator. It promises immediate satisfaction, then charges you later with anxiety, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Think about the last argument you had. How many hours did it continue inside your head? How much time did you give away thinking about someone who had probably already forgotten the entire conversation? That's what losing your freedom looks like. Not because someone forced you to, but because you kept feeding a conflict that had already ended. This brings us back to the silent habit we mentioned earlier. Rumination. Replaying the same moment over and over, editing the conversation in your head, imagining the perfect comeback, creating scenarios that never happen, believing that thinking about it longer will somehow make the pain disappear. But the opposite is true. Every repetition strengthens the emotional circuit. It's like walking the same path through a forest every single day. The more you walk it, the easier it becomes to walk again. The same thing happens inside your brain. Every repeated thought builds momentum. And eventually that momentum becomes identity. After enough time, you begin saying things like, "I'm just an anxious person. I'm naturally impulsive. I've always been this way." No, you've simply practiced one way of reacting so many times that it now feels like part of who you are. But practicing a reaction for years doesn't mean you were born with it. It means you can train a different one. And this is where the first great mystery of this video is finally resolved. The Stoics weren't trying to suppress their emotions. They were training themselves to create a small space between the stimulus and the response. A space so small it's almost invisible. Just a single moment of awareness. Because in that moment, something extraordinary happens. For the first time, the automatic program stops running your life, and a choice appears. That tiny space changes everything. Without it, you react. With it, you choose. But there's something even deeper you still need to understand. Why are some people able to maintain that emotional distance, even in the most difficult situations, while others are shattered by a single criticism? The answer isn't willpower. It's the way they've built their identity. And that shift in perspective is about to completely transform the way you understand inner peace. There's a story that explains this idea better than any theory ever could. Two men are sent to prison on the same day. They share the same cell. The same food. The same cold. The same uncertainty. One is consumed by hatred. The other walks out years later with a level of mental clarity that inspires thousands of people. The question is unavoidable. How can two people live through the exact same reality and become completely different human beings? The answer was never the prison. It was the meaning each man chose to give it. And that is the difference between surviving your circumstances and allowing your circumstances to define you. This is where the real shift in perspective begins. Most people believe self-control means controlling their emotions. But that's a battle you've already lost before it even starts. Emotions appear. They don't ask for permission. You can't stop them from arising. You'll feel anger, fear, frustration, shame. That's part of being human. What you can control is what you do next. And that next is what builds your character. You're not responsible for the first spark. You're responsible for the fire. It sounds like a small distinction dot in reality. It changes an entire life because it stops you from becoming a victim of your emotions. They don't ask for permission. You can't stop them from arising. You'll feel anger, fear, frustration, shame. That's part of being human. What you can control is what you do next. And that next is what builds your character. You're not responsible for the first spark. You're responsible for the fire. It sounds like a small distinction dot in reality. It changes an entire life because it stops you from becoming a victim of your emotions and turns you into the person responsible for what you choose to do with them. That's the principle behind every form of real discipline. Don't wait for the perfect emotional state. Act from the right identity. Think about someone you admire for their calmness. Do you believe they never feel angry? Of course they do. The difference is that they don't treat every emotion like a command. Most people instantly obey whatever they feel. A trained mind observes first, then it decides, and turns you into the person responsible for what you choose to do with them. That's the principle behind every form of real discipline. Don't wait for the perfect emotional state. Act from the right identity. Think about someone you admire for their calmness. Do you believe they never feel angry? Of course they do. The difference is that they don't treat every emotion like a command. Most people instantly obey whatever they feel. A trained mind observes first, then it decides, then confidently claiming you've seen the entire view. That illusion of certainty is responsible for most human conflict. Someone speaks harshly. You assume they're trying to humiliate you. But what if they've had the worst day of their life? What if they're carrying a burden you know nothing about? What if they weren't even talking about you? The mind fills empty spaces with stories. And almost every time, it writes a story where you're the main character. That's the ego's job, to convince you that everything revolves around you. If someone doesn't say hello, it must be about you. If someone criticizes something, it must be aimed at you. If someone changes, it must somehow be your fault. The ego needs to believe it's the center of the universe. Reality is much simpler. Most people are far too busy fighting their own battles to spend nearly as much time thinking about yours. Understanding that frees an incredible amount of energy, because you stop interpreting every event as a personal attack. You begin responding with curiosity instead of pride. And curiosity almost always leads to better decisions than the ego does. This brings us to another powerful principle: identity rewiring. Most people try to master their emotions by changing only their behavior. It works for a few days. Then they fall right back into old patterns. Why? Because they still see themselves the same way. They keep saying things like, I'm impulsive. I always lose my temper. I just don't have patience. Every one of those statements strengthens the old identity, and your identity will always try to prove itself right. If you define yourself as someone who explodes under pressure, your mind will unconsciously search for behaviors that confirm that definition, not because you want to suffer, but because the brain craves consistency. It would rather hold on to a familiar negative identity than step into a new one that still feels unfamiliar. That's why real change never begins by asking, what should I do? It begins by asking, who do I want to be the next time I'm challenged? Notice the difference. You don't say, I'll try not to yell. You say, I'm someone who responds with clarity. You don't say, I'm going to try to control my temper. You say, I'm building an identity that doesn't trade its peace for temporary impulses. It sounds like nothing more than different wording. In reality, it's an entirely different direction. Actions follow identity, not the other way around. Think about an athlete. They don't train only because they want to win a competition. They train because they already see themselves as an athlete. Their actions are a natural expression of who they believe they are. The same is true for you. Once you begin seeing yourself as someone who protects their inner peace, many decisions stop requiring effort. They simply stop making sense, arguing over every little thing, reacting immediately, needing the last word, craving approval. Those behaviors begin to feel incompatible with the person you're becoming. Now here's an idea that can transform the way you live every day. Spiritual economics. Everyone talks about managing money. Very few people know how to manage their attention. Yet attention is infinitely more valuable, because lost money can be earned back. A day wasted in resentment is gone forever. Every unnecessary argument drains your energy. Every repetitive thought charges interest. Every imaginary conflict comes with a hidden fee. Before you realize it, you're emotionally exhausted before you've spent even 1 minute on what truly matters. That's why mentally strong people don't win every argument. In fact, they rarely feel the need to join most of them. They've learned that not everything deserves a response. Not every criticism deserves your attention. Not every provocation deserves your energy. That's not weakness. It's strategy. It's discipline. It's protecting the scarcest resource you'll ever possess, your awareness. And when you begin guarding it the way you'd protect your greatest treasure, something extraordinary happens. The same difficult people still exist. The same problems still arise. The same provocations still come your way. But you're no longer the same person, because you've realized that the goal was never to change the world. The goal was always to stop handing your peace over to it. Now the question is no longer, how do I stop other people from affecting me? It becomes something far more powerful. What kind of person do I choose to be, even if other people never change? That's where true freedom begins. But understanding this isn't enough. Any philosophy that never becomes practice eventually turns into intellectual entertainment. Transformation requires training. And in the next section, you'll turn these ideas into a practical 5-level system you can use the very next time someone tries to steal your peace. Understanding an idea can inspire you for a few minutes. Training it can change you forever. That's the difference between consuming content and rebuilding your character. Knowledge alone doesn't transform you. Repetition does. Your identity doesn't change because you understand a truth. It changes when that truth becomes a habit, and for that you need a system. Not something complicated. Something you can remember at the exact moment you need it most. Not when you're calm, but when someone is trying to get under your skin. Not when everything is going well, but when everything seems to be pushing you to react. There's a daily practice that takes less than a minute and ties all 5 of these levels together. You'll discover it at the end of this section. But first, let's build the foundation. Level 1. Create space before you react. The first victory never happens during an argument. It happens a few seconds before it begins. At this level, you'll reclaim the one resource impulsive people never seem to have: time to choose. When someone provokes you, your body wants to react immediately. Your voice speeds up. Your muscles tighten. Your breathing becomes shallow. Your brain interprets the situation as a threat, and it responds as if your survival depends on it. But criticism isn't a lion. An uncomfortable comment isn't a life or death situation. It's your automatic system confusing the two. That's why the first practice isn't about thinking better. It's about interrupting the impulse. Pause. Take one slow, deep breath, not to calm yourself down, to take back control. That brief silence may seem insignificant. In reality, It's the exact moment you become the owner of yourself again. The emotional slave reacts. The trained mind chooses. Breathe before you respond. Ask yourself, who's making this decision, my character or my impulse? Think about the brakes on a car. They don't make the car go faster. They don't change the destination. But they prevent accidents that can take years to repair. Your pause serves exactly the same purpose. It doesn't eliminate conflict. It prevents you from multiplying it. Level 2. Question your first interpretation. At this level, you'll discover that most emotions don't come from events themselves. They come from the stories you tell yourself about those events. Someone says something unexpected. Your mind instantly fills in the blanks. They're disrespecting me. They don't value me. They're trying to embarrass me. But almost never do you stop to verify those conclusions. You simply act as if they're facts. This is where you need to train a new question. What else could this mean? That single question interrupts the automatic judgment. And when you interrupt the judgment, you weaken the emotion the emotional slave assumes. The trained mind investigates. Facts don't insult you. Ask yourself this uncomfortable question. How many arguments began because of a story you invented? Imagine someone hands you a blurry photograph. Would you make an important decision based on it? Probably not. Yet that's exactly what you do every time you react with incomplete information. Limited perception always exaggerates what it doesn't understand. Clarity begins the moment you admit you may not be seeing the whole picture. Level 3. Stop feeding your ego. This level is uncomfortable because you'll realize that many arguments were never about justice. They were about pride. The ego has one constant need. To prove it deserves recognition. To prove it's right. To prove it should be validated. And when it doesn't get those things, it declares war. But the ego never fights for free. It always burns your peace as fuel. Every unnecessary argument you insist on winning comes with an invisible price. Hours of energy. Stress. Anxiety. Mental replay. The emotional slave needs to win. The trained mind wants to understand. The ego always sends the bill. Ask yourself one brutally honest question. Would you rather be right or at peace? History is filled with leaders who lost entire empires because they couldn't control their pride. It's also filled with ordinary people who destroyed families simply because no one was willing to say, "You're right. This isn't worth fighting over." Sometimes the greatest display of strength is walking away from a battle that never deserved to exist. Not because you're weak, because your energy is too valuable to waste. Level 4. Protect your inner wealth. This level changes your entire perspective. Imagine waking up every morning with a bank account containing 100 coins. Every argument costs 10. Every resentment costs 20. Every obsessive thought costs another 5. By the end of the day, your account is nearly empty. Now replace those coins with attention. That's exactly how your life works. Your attention is your most valuable currency. It's how you build relationships. Learn. Work. Create. Enjoy life. Love. But it's also something you can spend on conflicts that will never produce anything of value. Emotionally strong people are excellent investors of attention. They don't respond to everything. They don't read everything. They don't join every controversy because they understand one simple rule. What you feed grows. The emotional slave spends energy. The trained mind invests it. Your attention is your greatest asset. Ask yourself with complete honesty, who is getting richer from the energy you're losing every day? A wise investor doesn't put money into businesses they already know will fail. So why do you keep investing hours of your life in people and conflicts that will never produce peace? Discipline also means saying, I'm not investing here anymore. Level 5. Build an unbreakable identity. This is where everything changes, because now you're no longer training behaviors. You're training who you are. The next time someone tries to provoke you, don't think, I need to control myself. Instead ask, how would the person I'm becoming respond? The difference is enormous. One question depends on willpower. The other depends on identity. And identity always wins in the long run. Truly calm people weren't born that way. They repeated small, consistent choices for years, until those choices no longer felt like effort. They became natural. The same can happen to you. Every provocation is another repetition. Every intentional silence is another repetition. Every thoughtful response is another repetition. And every repetition strengthens the person you're becoming. The emotional slave changes with the environment. The trained mind remains steady. Identity drives behavior. Now face this question honestly. How much longer are you going to protect a version of yourself that you already know is holding you back? Think about someone training for strength. No muscle is built in a single workout, but every repetition leaves an invisible mark. Until one day, the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. Character works exactly the same way. No one will see the times you chose silence. No one will applaud the arguments you decided not to have. No one will know how many times you paused to breathe before responding, but you will. And those quiet, private victories are the ones that build unshakable public strength. Now the final piece comes together. The daily practice that takes less than 1 minute. At the end of each day, ask yourself only 3 questions. What situation tried to steal my peace today? How did I actually respond? How would the person I'm becoming have responded? That's it. Less than a minute. But repeating this exercise every night does something extraordinary. You stop training only your reactions. You begin training your awareness. And when awareness grows, impulse loses its power, because true peace never happens by accident. It's built. One decision at a time. One thought at a time. One less reaction. Every single day. Let's return to where we began. If another person has the power to control your emotions, then they also have the power to control part of your life. And that's an authority you were never meant to give away. Throughout this journey, you've uncovered a truth that changes the way you think about self-control. The problem was never other people. It was never your circumstances. It was never the world. The real problem was the automatic pattern you kept using to respond to everything you couldn't control. And if that pattern was learned, it can also be unlearned. By now, you know that peace isn't lost the moment an argument begins. It's lost the moment you allow an emotion to make your decisions. You've also discovered that there is a space between stimulus and response. Small, almost invisible, but powerful enough to give you your life back. That space is where character is built. Not on easy days, but in difficult moments, because character isn't something you have. It's something you practice. Every choice strengthens an identity. Every reaction does too. So the real question is no longer, how do I get other people to change? The real question is, who do I choose to be when other people don't? That's where freedom begins. Not when life becomes easier, but when it stops controlling you. Sooner or later, another criticism will come. Another disappointment. Another provocation. That's inevitable. What isn't inevitable is your response. You can react from impulse, or you can respond from character. And that choice, repeated over and over again, changes the course of your life. Because self-control isn't about feeling less. It's about obeying your emotions less. Your emotions will still appear, but they no longer have to make your decisions. That choice belongs to you. And when you reach that point, you'll discover something most people spend their entire lives searching for. Peace was never something the world could give you. It was something only you could protect. If you've made it this far, don't let these ideas become another video you forget tomorrow. Turn them into a practice dot, because knowledge inspires. Practice transforms. If you're making that commitment today, write this in the comments. Today I take back control, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to remind yourself of the person you're becoming. And if you're ready to build a stronger mind instead of waiting for an easier life, subscribe, because the world will always test your character. The only question that truly matters is this: who will you choose to be the next time it does?